Ever wondered what it's like to wake up and question everything you thought you knew about yourself? In the gripping world of Enemy Me, Kent's journey begins with an unsettling awakening, forcing him to confront a past that isn't entirely his own. As he navigates a hidden facility, he forms alliances with the enigmatic AI Mike and the silently observant android Prax, whose very existence challenges the boundaries of consciousness and leaves them both pondering what it truly means to feel. But the deeper Kent digs into his borrowed memories, the more he realizes there's a crucial piece missing, a forgotten truth that could unravel everything. From philosophical debates on identity and artificial intelligence to high-stakes investigations and a world grappling with radical social and technological changes, these chapters throw our characters into a whirlwind of discovery and impending conflict. New relationships blossom amidst the chaos, while old loyalties are tested and the stakes for humanity grow exponentially. The news is already gearing up to expose this monumental conspiracy, promising a Pulitzer Prize story that will shake the world. Prepare for a story where every revelation deepens the mystery and every character holds a piece of a larger, more dangerous puzzle. What is Forrest Taylor's true agenda? Can Kent piece together the missing memories before it's too late? And who can truly be trusted when even identity itself is a manufactured concept? Dive into Enemy Me and uncover the secrets that could determine the very future of humankind.
It's me, enemy me, the one I fight, looking through many eyes to make things right. I watch over my many selves, planning to attack the one self, dying again and again and again, only to awake and begin from the end of a self. I'm my worst enemy, fighting myself to win myself. It's a fight I have to win, not just me, but for humanity. Losing is not an option, it can never be. The self that wants change, the self that wants fortune, the self that wants power, the self that wants control, the self that hates itself. With the rest of myself, we work together to win. The self is lost, victory is ours. Not just the self, but for all selves. Humanity will change, but not into a self. My enemy me is the self, the one who lost. With the others found, we won this round. Forever life is ourself.
Chapter 8. Kent woke with a start. He was in his bed, which felt odd but natural at the same time. His body had 20 years of upright, suspended sleep embedded, but being in a prone position just seemed right on the physical level. For a moment, he wondered if the entire day had been a dream. The chamber, the computer, android, the videos of someone that looked like him, the beautiful woman. He turned his head to the left. She was there, sleeping on the pillow, snoring softly. It wasn't a dream. A flood of images overwhelmed him. He was a clone, which was remarkable. Conceived, cultivated, nurtured to birth age and accelerated to a specific age and held in stasis until another cloned unit expired. But he was different. He was the last cloned unit of the original. He, also, had choices the others didn't. He could wake the others left behind. The others, in any order he presumed. He had that option, which made him unique. He was different. That was important. He had to hold on to that thought. Carbon copies have the distinction of being flawed copies of the original. He was different. Different. A word that means what? Distinct, separate, Not the same as another or each other. Dissimilar. Hold on to that. Kent. Your name is Kent. You are Kent. I am Kent, he said softly. Kent. Yes. He got up and walked into the bathroom. The lights came on automatically. He stood in front of the mirror and stared. Kent, he said, sampling the name and finally deciding it tasted well. A nice, heady feel, weighed by reason that lacked superficial and superfluous emotion. This was clinical. He was Kent. Becky leisurely woke up. She yawned, stretched, and yawned again. Last night had been good. She didn't think it was great. George had turned into a great lover over the years. Kent was as George was on their first night. Cutely shy, handsomely awkward, and innocently consistent. She only had 2 orgasms, and that was because she took control and became top. But she was content. George was gone, but not gone. It was like he lost his memory and had to relearn things again. She was okay with that. She was also okay if he never truly left her. Kent was not George. She was just happy to be able to be in his presence. He was his own person, and she would try hard not to remind him that he was not the original, but, in fact, an original himself. Morning, she said when she saw Kent walk out of the bathroom. Kent smiled. Morning. They made love last night. It was great for him, but he had the feeling that she hadn't been completely satisfied. George had 6 years of practice. He was only, technically, a day old, which was a stupefying concept to wrap one's brain around. Literally, yesterday was nothing but firsts for him. Today would be no different, except the firsts wouldn't be as often, and seconds are never as OMG-worthy as the first time. Any special plans today? Becky asked. Kent slowly shook his head while exhaling from a deep breath. Take a walk outside? Maybe. Becky smiled. Probably not so close to the building. We're about 100 feet below one of the roughest neighborhoods in the city. Roughest? The Everglades? It was a very prestige place. She interrupted. 20+ years ago. He got teary-eyed. TV? TV is still around? She laughed. Almost nothing but TV. She led Kent through a hallway. He didn't remember, to a small theater of sorts. 12 large upholstered chairs lined up in 3 rows with a comfortable, wide center space separating 2 chairs on either side of it. Becky slightly tilted her head to the ceiling. Mike, anything special at this hour? Yes, ma'am. The Lord Patricia of Glencoe is conducting the 23rd Highlands title gathering at Loch Lenny. The event highlights 1 million plots sold to date. It is heralded as a beacon of conservation done right and profitably. Wait, Kent started. Lord Patricia? Shouldn't that be Lady Patricia? Lord is now a recognized title for a female, sir. Interestingly, there are 3 times more female lords than there are male ladies. Kent nodded. Gay marriage? Internationally recognized. Male, females, and mamales and fails, respectively indicating a male would surgically become a female, and female, through surgery, becomes male. Though may insist on being called male or female and not the new terms. I see, Kent said. Well, maybe I should spend the day looking at TV. Would you recommend I start with the news? No, sir, I would not. Kent asked. Because? Not of any value to you comprehending the world. I have lined up a selection of documentaries, movies, TV shows, news footages that would be better. I can have Prax bring you classic popcorn and a glass of white wine for your enjoyment. There will be various snacks throughout the day. Becky leaned into Kent. It's been a long time since I've been to the movies. Let's spend the day watching what Mike has cooked up. Kent turned to Becky and stared her in the eye. He bit his bottom lip. You have no plans? She shook her head. I took the entire month off for a vacation. It's going on week 2 now. I couldn't possibly think of a better way to spend time with my... She hesitated and frowned briefly. With you, if you'd let me. Her expression relaxed. I really would like to spend the day with you. She looked down. Kent thought she was going to say boyfriend. He coughed. Then a day of leisure we will spend. Then he frowned. There is something I want to remember, but can't. George used to say the same thing. He mentioned Kevin talked about the memory gaps too. And they were told? The same thing. The process was not perfect. It could have been a corrupted data stream. It could have been a perfect data transfer. But you and everyone else's brains are not identical to Prime's brain, which would support uniqueness. Kent thought about that as he walked to the front row. I suppose, but I'd think we'd not remember more. Becky sat in one of the chairs closest to the aisle. Maybe that's the main question there. How would you guys know what was missing if you can't remember it? I can't remember my first cell phone number, for instance. Kent took a chair opposite Becky's. He nodded. True, but you remember you had a cell phone number. I remember I forgot something, but can't remember what I forgot. If I were positive I memorized a credit card number and then later forgot the number, I could be confident it is somewhere in my head to remember. But some of these gaps are almost like... gaps. He frowned. Like intentional cuts. Maybe buffer data forced in a wait state, and when the flow restarted, there was a space between the 2 points. You guys talked often about this? Becky slowly nodded. Some. I bounced lots of ideas off George and vice versa. Kent squinted his eyes. Did George leave any memories for me? Silence hung awkwardly in the air. Mike finally said, Yes, he did. I wasn't going to mention anything until you've had some weeks' time getting used to being you. How come? George recorded a substantial amount of himself. Becky's eyes widened. That I didn't know. Yes, ma'am. About 8,652 hours, 2 minutes, and 39 seconds. Almost a year's worth, Kent exclaimed. Yes, sir, Mike said. He'd hoped the option would come up sooner than later. Other than you hoping I get some me time in, what are the dangers? Mike remained silent for about 3 minutes. Becky said nothing and seemed surprised that Kent waited just as long. She learned long ago the art of shutting mouth, especially with Mike. When he was ready to talk, he would. George had some patience. Just enough, she thought. Kent had more. She was about to ask Mike was he still thinking when he said, Personality overlapping. Kent asked, The memory transference from another clone, is that pervasive? Mike replied, In this case, it may be. George recorded so much of his memory that his prejudices, of which you may not have formed yet or may have a different view, might overlap or replace yours. Replacement is not what I'm worried about. Kent nodded. Overlapping. It may cause some schisms and psychoses. That's not good. Becky said, Mike, did George make a visual record of what he backed up? He did not. Any way to only send it to short-term memory? Mike answered, Undetermined. Dreams. What about making the memories dreams? Undetermined. Kent said, Seriously? In 20 years, none of the Petes, Kevin, or George thought this through? It must have come up before. Mike answered, It has, sir. Becky spoke up. George and I had many nights of discussing this, but I thought it was all thought experimenting and hypothetical. Mike, can we take a section of George's memory and encode it as a dream? I don't think I need all of it at once. Undetermined if fragmented memories could work as a dream. There would be no referenced beginning or end. Kent nodded. That's the point, just like dreams. Yeah, sometimes we all dream in a beginning, middle, and end, but oftentimes we don't remember the beginning or the first of the beginning. This could be one of those times. If I retain it, good. If not, no harm. But, sir, this dream would have been inserted into your conscious. There is no precedence in this. We will be working with memories duplicated to the neuron impulse. Mike, I'm surprised at you. How so, sir? I have some of Pete's memory, remember? I do remember, sir. However, please let me point out that you began with a blank slate. The process imprinted over a brain that had no exterior stimuli. Once transference is done, we cannot undo. Let's look at this logically. George would be methodical and exact. I think he would give this careful thought and record what was important. I think he would avoid recording opinionated memories. Becky thought about that. Kent, George used the term repeater loop cycle often. Oh, that. It is possible he could have recorded a memory that looped multiple times in his mind during the recording process. It is quite natural. He looked up at the ceiling. Mike, how did George record the memories? At that moment, Prax stepped close. Kent visibly jumped. The android had silently walked up on him. Jesus, Prax, can't you make some noise when you walk up on me? No, sir, I will not. Kent frowned for a second, then his expression turned light. His brows raised and he smiled. Understood. I'll just have to be more aware of my surroundings then. Very good, sir. Being aware of one's surroundings is never a bad idea. Kent was finally getting it. Prax, may I ask you a personal question? You may ask, sir. And please do not be offended. I'm new here. Prax's expression never changed. Your CPU, is it in your head, or are you accessing your cognitive process off base? Prax remained silent for a few moments. This one was curious, he thought. He was created by Pete Prime, but this one interested him. For no particular logical reason he could compute, Prax decided to give this one time to grow. My CPU is in my head. So is my reasoning logic and everything that makes me, me. Kent nodded. Extraordinary. If you say so, sir, may I ask you a personal question? Of course. And please do not be offended. You're new to me. Kent smiled and nodded. How do you know you are you and not Pete Prime? That is a very good question. I feel like me. Feel, sir? Kent nodded. You and George never talked about feelings? No, sir. Seriously? Seriously, the android replied. However, Ms. Becky and I have talked. Becky injected. Kent, Prax really thinks. Don't let him fool you. Prax continued. I understand the definition. I understand the process. I was not created with stimuli in mind. I cannot feel. Kent nodded. I'm so sorry. Sorry, sir? Ms. Becky said the same thing. Would you like to feel? Prax answered immediately. Feel? Yes. Would you like to feel happy, sad, jealous, angry, envy, pride, afraid? Would you like to feel those and more? No, sir, I would not. And that is because they are very unproductive. Agreed. Totally a waste of time. Sometimes, but not always. Prax said, do you have some insight to add to the conversations Ms. Becky and I have had? Kent shrugged. Maybe. Maybe what I'll mention has been covered already. May I try? Of course, sir. I can always hear what you have to say. Anything else would be rude. Prax, I like you. Which is completely irrelevant to the discussion at the moment. Kent smiled. Really? Okay. Before we get started, I have a mathematical question for you. Yes, sir. And it relates to emotions. Yes, sir. Hypothetically, I have a piece of string that when folded in half gives equal sides of 11 inches. We still use inches, right? We do, sir. Good. If I tie the ends together, I get a string. When folded in half, that is 10 inches. Suppose I make a rectangle out of the string with one side, 1 inch, and the other side 9 inches. The area should be 9 square inches, correct? Prax hesitated a second. Yes, sir, 9 square inches. Kent said, now, suppose I make a square with the same string, with the sides 5 inches each. Yes, sir. I now have 25 square inches, correct? Correct, sir. Prax, that's the point. I don't understand, sir. The length after tying the knot never changed. Logic says that it is completely plausible. We are dealing with potentials, relatives, and variables, not absolutes. Simple algebra. He paused. Prax said, "And what would, I presume you would use the word emotion?" Kent nodded. "What would emotion say?" "Whoa." Prax paused for a moment and slowly said, "Whoa, sir?" "Whoa, as in, I didn't see that coming. Wow, mind blown." Prax remained silent for a few seconds before he turned and walked toward the door. Becky watched amused. With her arms akimbo, she smiled. Kent said, "But Prax, we aren't finished yet." Prax kept walking, but said, "Sir, please allow me a moment to ponder over our brief conversation." "Of course, Prax, of course." Becky said, "Interesting." Kent turned toward her. "How so?" "Not even George could do that." "Make an android ponder?" He lightly laughed. Becky nodded. "At the most, we've been able to make him pause for a few seconds, but he almost always came back with a rebuttal or counter-argument. You left him speechless." Kent rolled that through his mind. "I considered all the arguments I would have used, which, by default, George and all the others would have used, and thought of something I would never have used. I mean, one of my college math teachers presented that to the class once. I thought, wow." Prax walked to his holding station and locked in. Mike said, "Interesting argument." Prax replied, "Very interesting. Unexpected." Mike said, "Indeed." After several minutes, Prax replied, "Whoa." Chapter 9. Rick Pearl held a tablet in his hand. On the screen was a slightly hazy image of Dr. Pete Walker. The image showed him behind some large wooden crates. He was wearing some kind of backpack. Rick squinted and rubbed his forehead. It certainly looked like Dr. Pete Walker, but that was impossible. Dr. Walker died years ago. He should know. He was there. Dr. Walker agreed to an interview, but only in public. They met at the then new outdoor restaurant, Slaymachu. It was 1:30 p.m. The sky was clear. Traffic was light. He had just asked Dr. Walker about his recent departure from Forever Life, Inc. when, out of nowhere, a car plowed through the sidewalk crowd. The car struck Walker dead center. Rick suffered a broken arm and leg. Rehab took him nearly a year. Walker lost his life. The driver had been an elderly man in his 80s. His car, unimportant, had been a tenth his age, but he let maintenance lapse. The brakes failed, and at that moment, karma was paid by a dozen people. Scores of others had been spared the burden of payment. Barbara Tipper sat at the desk next to Rick's. He sighed and sat back. "The Forrest case?" she asked. He nodded. "It's maddening." He leaned forward. "Pete Walker died almost 15 years ago, yet here he is, again." He turned the tablet so that Barbara can see the image. "A clone?" She laughed. He shrugged. "A clone." He said more to himself and frowned. "He wouldn't have been able to do it in this country." "You sure about that? Madonna cloned herself, and so did Michael—" "Rumors, and not in this country," he interrupted. "Money, power, remember?" He nodded. "The UK, if he did." Barbara said, "Well, are you sure it's Walker?" He slowly shook his head. "It looks like him. It'll be a few more days for forensics to finish." He pulled the top drawer open and grabbed a blue and yellow wrapped piece of gum with red writing. He unrolled the ends and slipped out a piece of pink bubble gum. The drawer was full of open wrappers. He fished for several more unopened wrappers, looked at the trash can, and decided to not throw the empty wrappers away. Not yet. He needed the reminder that he was eating too much gum. It would have been all right if he spat the stuff out after chewing away the flavor, but he just couldn't. It was a habit he started as a kid. Chew, chew, bite a small piece off, swallow it, over and over again until it was all gone. Barbara watched as Rick, her partner, popped a piece of bubblegum in his mouth. Smoking was a bitch. Kicking the habit was bitchier. She marked her desk calendar with a line next to lots of other lines and slashes. She was counting the number of times he chewed gum, which in his case, swallowed. Rick slid his finger across the screen. Another image showed. Pete ran through a doorway. Several guards had walked out earlier. "Barbara, anything yet on internal cameras?" Barbara typed at her desktop computer. The monitor was about 24 inches wide and rested flat on her desk. Rick liked the monitor upright. Barbara liked hers flat. Several text messages popped up on the screen. "Nothing yet." One text message read, "Retired keycard used." She tapped out a command. "Interesting." She queried the computer further. Absent-mindedly, she said, "How can an expired keycard still work?" Rick looked up. "Got something?" "Maybe." She scrolled through several images. There, Pete Walker. "No way." Rick stretched his neck for a better look. He smiled. "Now you think there's something hinky going on?" She sent the images and computer text dialogue to her printer. Several 4x6 thin white plastic cards slid out of her printer and slid into a tray. Various QVCs, rule codes, and contact morph bumps covered the surface of each card. She slipped the cards into thin open slots on her tablet. Rick said, "I think we need to take a trip out to the Forever Life building." She nodded. Rick reached over to his desk phone. He said, "The captain." Seconds later, the small screen lit to a grizzled, graying man with thick eyebrows. "Kovic here." Rick faced the small monitor. "Captain, Tib and I need to make a run to the Forever Life building." Kovic scowled. "You do?" Rick nodded. "Questions, sir. Questions." Kovic tapped at something off-screen. A few seconds later, "Approved. Microforensics is still there. Tell the guard, code Foxtrot Oscar. Forrest started leaning on the commander and city council about a year ago. We got another 5 hours to get what we can." He gave an intense stare into the screen. Rick gave him a mocking, intense stare back. "Understood, sir." Kovic snorted. "Out." Rick leaned back and smiled. Barbara said, "You better cut that out. One day the old man is going to come down here and kick your ass." "Until that time comes, I can continue practicing." He laughed softly. He checked his ID, badge, gun, wallet, and keys. Barbara said, "My turn to drive." "Really?" "Really." "All right, let me get my helmet and Kevlar." "Fuck you," she spat. Rick smiled. "You keep threatening. Put up or shut up." He laughed. Barbara stuck her tongue out. "Insult or offering?" She shook her head. "I keep falling for that silly shit of yours," and walked out the door to the garage. Rick smiled and followed. Tip was stone gay, which made teasing her all the more fun. Once they did kiss. It was kind of weird. Both tried again, admitted it felt good, but decided partners first was better. Neither mentioned it again. Forrest had accepted the message from Captain Kovic. He was tempted to deny further visitation. It would have been all on principle if he had, of course, but to what end? He acknowledged the message and replied with, "Granted." Forever Life was on the verge of making hundreds of billions of dollars. This setback was at best a nuisance. Acting like a legitimate investigation was counterproductive to business as usual, would drop share points. He had stockholders to consider. So, by his grace, he allowed the police to do their job. He knew what they would find, and the firestorm and maelstrom of rumors, speculation, and acquisitions would begin again. Forever Life stocks would drop, for a time, and then rebound. That in and of itself was good. He'd sell some of his shares during freefall and buy at the bottom. But the issue was Walker. His clones were bites on his ass that never seemed to fade away. Every few years a bite would break skin, and the pain would be sharp. Other times, the bite felt more like a nibble and tickled. This bite went deep into the hypodermis and drew blood. Forrest sat behind his desk while the two detectives were let in. He motioned for them to sit in the only 2 chairs in front of his massive oak desk. "Would you like something to drink?" Forrest asked. Rick, Not one to pass up an offer to taste good booze, said yes. Barbara said water.
Anything in particular, Detective? Troy is very adept. Cognac?
Forrest's assistant, Troy, nodded and walked over to a wet bar at one end of the office. He made Mr. Taylor's usual, gin and tonic, with one Gaeta olive speared by a toothpick. He dropped several cubes of ice into a frosted glass and topped it with water. For Rick's drink, he poured a generous amount of Louis XIII into a short glass. He added a bit of club soda and some bitters. He carried the drinks on a tray and handed them out when he reached Forrest's desk. Forrest nodded.
I'll buzz you when the good detectives are ready to leave.
Troy nodded and walked out with the tray underneath his arms. Rick sipped his cognac mix and savored the smooth burn down his throat. Forrest sipped at his drink.
So, detectives, how may I be of service?
Barbara watched Forrest and noted he was almost too cool. His breathing was steady at 10 breaths per minute. She could not tell his pulse, but she figured it was low. His bio showed that he ran quarter marathons 5 days a week and swam Olympic-like performances on the weekends in his supersized pool. He was the 15th richest man in the world, but didn't overly flaunt it. He paid his workers well, gave great bonuses at the end of the year, and seldom threw parties. He lived alone. That is, as much alone as a billionaire and a mansion full of servants who fulfilled his needs 24/7. He never married, but dated some of the most famous men and women Hollywood produced.
Clones.
Forrest never blinked.
Clones are illegal in this country. Have you seen the video feeds from today? I haven't, but you have?
Rick nodded.
It's very interesting. In one frame, there is an image of the suicide bomber. Bastard.
Forrest spat. Barbara wasn't sure if it was anger toward the bomber or what it cost him in delays. She instinctively knew it wasn't for loss of life. Barbara pulled a 4x6 plastic sheet from her tablet. She handed it to Forrest. He placed the sheet face down on a spot on his desk. The image lit up on his monitor. Clearly it was an image of Pete Walker, and of himself before he made changes. He passed the sheet back to Barbara.
It looks like Pete, but it is not him.
Rick said,
How do you know? Because I oversaw Pete's burial myself. Pete was my brother.
Rick nodded. Twins, separated at birth, which he never really bought into. Pretty rare to have a twin that was exact in height. There was not one copy number variant. Not one. And that was statistically never going to happen. But everyone played along. Some in the news media hinted at it, but no one really pushed the issue. The far right didn't, nor did the far left. But everyone knew the Walkers were the reason why Congress had passed a rare bipartisan bill preventing full-bodied cloning in America. Parts and organs could be cloned, but not a whole person to full term.
Yes, sir, I understand, but clearly this individual looks like Pete Walker. He can't be explained,
Forrest said. Rick took a sip from his glass and decided not to push it.
Do you know your enemies personally?
Forrest paused in mid-thought. Of course he did. One can't be as rich and powerful as he was without having to crush 1 or 2 lives. Climbing the ladder involves stepping on rungs. Who's to say how easy it is to avoid the fingers of others wrapped around said rungs?
Detective, I have plenty of enemies. Rivals, too. Pharmaceutical drugs is a $1 billion annually earned business. Forever Life Inc., by its very nature, survives by the attritions of others. So, the list of people and corporate entities who hate me and the company is probably very long.
Rick nodded.
Is it possible to get a list of names, addresses, and numbers or companies who may hate you enough to send in a suicide bomber?
Forrest thought for a moment. He pressed an intercom button on his desk.
Troy, please prepare a PDF sheet from the CTAC folder.
A few moments later, Troy walked in holding a thin white plastic 4x6 card. He handed it to Barbara. She slipped the PDS into her tablet and grunted. No kidding. Very long. Rick said,
The keycard that had been used was Pete Walker's expired keycard.
He let that hang in the air. Forrest refused to take the bait.
Interesting. That's all you have to say?
Forrest nodded.
What would you like me to say?
Both men remained silent for a time. Barbara cleared her throat and started getting up. Mr. Taylor, thank you for your time. If you don't mind, we'd like to make a pass at the damaged floor. Forrest slowly broke eye contact with Rick.
Why, of course.
He looked toward Rick.
I'll have Troy escort you.
Rick got up slowly, nodded, and said,
Thank you.
Forrest gave him a nod and pressed the intercom button.
Troy, please escort the good detectives to the RDC.
The door opened. Troy waited for Barbara and Rick to reach him. After the detectives left, Forrest swung his chair toward the large window. He stared at his reflection.
Even after all these years, brother, you torment me. May you give me rest from sins we both committed.
Rick and Barbara followed Troy to the elevator that would take them to RDC. Several guards snapped to attention as the three walked past.
Excuse me, Troy, may I ask you a question?
Rick spoke. Troy gave him a side glance, but didn't answer. Rick smiled.
I'll take your not saying no as a yes.
Troy continued to walk.
Do you like working for Mr. Taylor?
Troy stopped, turned to face Rick fully.
I am paid extremely well. The benefits are dreamlike. Mr. Taylor is not a tyrant. What do you think?
Rick said,
Fair enough. Did you know his brother, Pete Walker?
Troy started walking to the elevator.
Not personally.
The doors parted and all three entered. Troy leaned into a retina scanner and said,
RDC.
Several lights on the elevator wall panel flashed green. Barbara felt the smooth acceleration as the elevator descended the distance to the RDC. She counted 20 seconds. Must be about 80 stories down, which was about right given the visible damage observed from the ground. Forrest's office was near the top. The damage was about a third from the bottom. The doors opened, and Troy led the two out, down a long corridor to an area that was akin to a war zone. Twisted and mangled metal poles jutted out randomly. Concrete walls with large holes seemed to be on the verge of collapse, filled the landscape. Bright yellow caution tape stretched across an opening to the side. All three stepped underneath the tape and walked toward a small knot of 3 individuals hunched over a particularly dark spot. There were a dozen scattered throughout the room, along the floor and walls. This spot was about 20 feet wide. The microforensics team collectively looked up as Troy, Barbara, and Rick approached. Rick flashed his badge. The team went back to work. One said,
Not flashbang.
His name tag read Thompson. The second one, female, was wearing a helmet of sorts. Her name tag read Smekov. 2 large goggle-linked lens protruded from the front. Rick thought steampunk, changed his mind. Animapunk would have fit better. The third person, male, was holding a tablet out in front of him. His name tag read Anosov. Smekov said, Found it. Spec shows pent. Anosov slid his finger across the tablet screen. He whispered, Pent. The screen brightened, then dimmed to show a chart of colored lines. He nodded.
High grade.
The screen changed again.
Resin down to millipic on that grain.
Smekov whispered something into her helmet mic. It's pure. Anosov said,
Surpasses Chi grade.
Rick frowned.
And that means?
Thompson looked up.
Means we're fucked if this stuff can be made at high volume. We'll have a better estimate later. But this one big black spot was caused by a thumbnail-sized device.
Silence hung between them. Thompson continued.
The walls were 10 feet thick, reinforced with high tensile compression strength composites.
To underscore his words, wind blew in from several gaping holes at various points along the outside walls and stirred up loose paperwork that survived the blast. Troy rushed to collect the papers before the wind carried them outside.
It's a wonder the main blast hasn't taken out the floors above and below us.
Rick said,
Main blast?
Anosov said,
These black spots are probably caused by those thumbnail grenades. The extreme damage we see around us was caused by one large, final blast.
Rick thought a bit. Barbara ventured. So our bomber gained access into this room, tossed around grenades. She spread her hands out and made quote signs in the air, and then blew himself up. All three shrugged. Smirkov took off her helmet. Blonde hair unfolded onto her shoulders. Don't know, yet. PNR finished mapping a few hours ago. Once a gram vid is created, we'll be able to get a probable sequence of events. Give him 40 hours, maybe more. Rick asked.
And your finds?
The three looked at one another, faced Rick and Barbara, and said in unison, 24 hours, we need sleep and nourishment. All three slowly smiled simultaneously. Rick and Barbara thought that moment a bit creepy. Troy stopped in mid-step. A piece of paper with burnt edges flew past his face, reached the outside, and blew off in the distance. Thompson said,
Well, we do need some sleep.
Rick nodded and took a step back. Barbara followed, and Troy cleared his throat.
Detectives, anything else I may be able to help you with?
Rick said,
Can you tell us?
His voice trailed off as he noticed about a dozen men in dark suits standing throughout the room. He hadn't noticed them when he first entered, or even when he looked around earlier.
How long have they been here?
Without looking, Troy answered,
They've always been here.
Rick frowned. Smirkov said, It is true. It's Forever Life Security. The three looked at one another again, and in unison said slowly, They watch over us. The identical smiles returned. Rick and Barbara paused. Troy said,
If I am not needed, I'll leave you to finish up. One of the security units will escort you to the lift when you are done.
Barbara looked up to where Troy was pointing at. She finally noticed security. Over a dozen scattered throughout the floor, pressed close to the many shadows across the room. Now that's creepy. Rick cleared his voice.
Hey, Troy, wait up. We're done.
Rick turned and started walking to the door.
I'll catch up with you guys sometime tomorrow.
He almost bumped into Barbara as both walked a bit too fast. Thompson and the others faced the retreating group and in unison said, That would be nice. See you tomorrow. Their voice combined to hit a resonating discord. He watched as Troy, Rick, and Barbara walked out. All the while, a half-dozen security units monitored their progress. Once the door closed, Thompson let out a laugh.
That was the funniest shit we ever pulled off.
Anisov and Smirkov joined him. Smirkov said, Did you see when Troy stopped and that piece of paper nearly hit him in the face? Anisov replied,
I had a hard time not laughing. Guys, we're gonna have to make up more of these.
Chapter 10. Rick and Barbara pulled into a parking spot outside the Lotion diner. It was often mispronounced as Lotion, but the owner pronounced it as Lotion. It was a local restaurant that specialized in home comfort food with a retro style built back in the double-aught ages. Barbara turned the cruiser off. You've been pretty quiet. Rick shifted in his seat.
It's a lie, Barb. Forrest fed us shit, and I'm almost certain the bomber was Walker or a Walker clone.
How would a clone get into this country?
Like everyone else, false cards.
But what about retina scan?
New eyes. Even in this country, we'll use cloned organs and limbs.
She nodded. Okay, supposing it was a clone. The question is, why a clone?
Why? Barb, think about it. The ultimate suicide bomber, an unlimited supply.
An expensive supply, more expensive than a Titan Hawk cruise missile. Rick had to concede that.
Yeah, but almost untraceable.
Nothing's untraceable these days. Rick laughed.
I did say almost.
Barbara's voice took on a serious tone. She turned her upper half to face Rick. If we follow your thinking, then what you are suggesting is epic. He nodded.
No less, but I've still got this nag hanging on my back.
Barbara lifted her chin up and she frowned.
Why Walker? Why Forever Life?
Forrest, that's why, she said. Rick cocked his head to one side.
Forrest?
Is a clone.
Barb, that's bull.
He stopped in mid-sentence.
It was the reflex.
Both laughed.
But seriously,
Rick said.
who would send a Pete clone?
Barbara thought a few seconds. She thought the answer was totally obvious. Pete Walker.
Pete?
Yeah, you got this lost twin brother thing going on in the past. Like, out of nowhere, there he is. First oddity, then the question about birth certificates. Number 2, then the delivery staff. All claim faulty memory, but all enjoying surprisingly improbable luck with the lottery and…
Okay, I'm impressed. I hadn't known you had an interest in the Walker conspiracy.
Huh, who hadn't? That fueled my young teenage mind. All my friends were into it. That's all we talked about. Rick scratched the bottom of his chin. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his gum. He unwrapped the wrapper and popped the gum in his mouth. Barbara automatically said, "Don't swallow." Rick automatically retorted,
What do you know about swallowing?
"Fuck you."
And you always threaten, never follow through.
Both laughed. Barbara said as she opened the car door, "I'm hungry. Stop talking and get out." Sarah Hill dropped off an order at table 2. It was ham cooked well, eggs sunny side up with whites firm, white toast plain, and a cup of coffee. Joe, the restaurant's regular, said,
Thanks, Sarah. You free tonight?
She laughed and walked off. Rick and Barbara walked through the door. Rick called out,
Hey, Sarah.
Sarah looked up, turned from wiping off a table, and smiled. Rick and Barb were her favorites. They tipped very well. She walked over and greeted the two. I got a table cleaned off. She gestured toward the table she finished cleaning. Rick sat on one side of the booth. Barbara sat at the other end. Sarah asked, The usual or something else? Rick visibly relaxed and said,
Pastrami, rye, the works, no pickle.
He hesitated and thought for a moment.
Give me a Bell's, please.
Barbara said, Now? Rick shrugged and nodded.
Why not? You're driving.
His smile was broad. Barbara gave him an evil eye. Her frown was deep. I'll have my usual, with water. Sarah nodded and jotted down the orders. She liked the detectives and had sexual fantasies about both. Rick fulfilled her sense of normalcy, while Barbara took care of a carefree and wild side. She dreamt of being bedded by the two. They seemed fun, and clearly the chemistry between the two worked. They teased openly and genuinely liked and respected one another. She knew Rick was straight and Barbara was gay, of which really meant nothing, except she could have the best of both worlds. She nodded. Coming right up. She turned and walked away to place the order with the head cook. She came out and headed to another table. A minute later, she had their order placed. Rick caught Barbara staring at the rear end of a retreating Sarah. He leaned over to her.
You'd do her, wouldn't you?
Barbara gave Rick a coy smile. Maybe, maybe not. I've seen the way she looks at you.
Me?
Seriously, you never noticed? He pulled out a bubblegum, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth.
I'm a regular guy. I don't notice those subtle female things. I'm
divorced because of it.
Gut punch. Not fair.
Just then, Sarah stepped out into the dining area, had a glass of water and a bottle of Bell's. She figured Rick wanted to drink straight from the bottle. Rick looked up as she placed the bottle in front of him. He smiled.
How did she know?
He thought. Sarah swept some hair that had drifted in front of her eye behind her ear. She smiled back. A second later, she heard Barbara cough. She realized she hadn't placed the glass down yet. Sorry. Barbara smiled. How's it been, Sarah? Anything new? Sarah gushed. Just working. Nothing new. No, wait. We did have someone from the station take samples on Mel's food. She asked him to cook everything on the menu. Mel was tickled. It took about 5 hours, but he did it. She paid full price and left a wonderful tip. Barbara said, Really? She leave a name or card? Sarah shook her head. Her name tag read Smikov. Rick laughed.
Probably one of those spooky projects they got going on in the lab.
Barbara answered. Probably. With those guys, you can't tell. Sarah politely nodded. Barbara noticed and gave Rick a light tap on his shin with her foot. He gave her the evil eye.
Hey, Sarah, is that a new do?
Sarah blushed. Since the last time you saw me, yeah. He totally bullshitted and hit target.
Very nice.
Several seconds ticked by. Barbara kicked Rick's shin harder.
Hey, Sarah, what do you do these days when not working?
A smile formed on her face, and she blushed lightly. Not much. Sometimes I catch a movie. You know they redid the bridge a few weeks ago?
I heard. I had been meaning to go, but, you know.
She nodded. Yeah, me too. Mel yelled out from back.
Order.
Sarah frowned and looked back. Food's ready. Be back. Once Sarah was out of earshot, Rick leaned over.
Stop kicking me, will ya?
Barbara smiled. Smooth moves, Romeo. Like, I had been meaning to go. Dough, you know. She laughed.
You can do better? I didn't just want to come on strong.
Barbara smiled. I know, and I'm sure she appreciated it. Rick nodded. Just ask her out. She'll either say yes and no.
All that easy for you?
Rick, trust me on this. He was about to reply when Sarah came out with their order. She placed Barbara's mushroom Florentine crepes down first.
Sarah, are you free tonight?
She nearly dropped his plate. Instinctively, Rick reached out to save his meal. Sarah recovered in time and neatly placed it in front of him. She cleared her throat. As a matter of fact, I am free. She waited. Barbara kicked Rick in the shin. Rick winced and forced a smile.
Want to see a movie or something?
She smiled and nodded. Yes, I would. Rick seemed surprised. All that easy, he thought. Damn you, Barb.
What time do you get off tonight?
8. We're a bit short-handed, so I have to pull time and a half. She suddenly frowned. Is that too late? Rick smiled and half-closed his eyes.
8 would be just fine. You want to meet there, or should I pick you up?
She replied, We can meet there. I don't want to inconvenience you.
Not at all.
In front of the ticket office? 8:30? He nodded.
Sounds good.
Mel yelled,
Order.
Sarah smiled, turned, and walked into the kitchen. Barbara kicked Rick.
God damn it, woman. Kick me in the shin again and I'm stomping that little man in the boat's head in.
So she did it again, but harder. He reached down and rubbed his shin. Barbara squinted and stuck her tongue out. Care to rephrase that? Chapter 11.
Prax?
Yes, sir.
I was hoping to satisfy a curiosity, if you don't mind.
Mind, sir? Kent nodded.
Yes, it's about emotions.
Prax turned to fully face Kent. His blank expression was unnerving. He remained silent.
Are you able to change your expression?
Yes, sir, I am. Kent smiled.
And you choose to show a face devoid of expression?
Yes, sir.
I see. If you were inclined to pick an expression, which one would it be?
Sir, why would I be inclined to select an expression?
1, it lets those around you know what kind of mood you're in, kind of like a warning or a welcome.
I see, said Prax. And you would like me to show an expression? Kent nodded.
It would be nice. I know you were created, but I also know you are an independent thinker. Are you self-aware?
Prax paused a moment. Is it necessary for me to be so, sir? Kent slowly shook his head and pursed his lips into a frown.
Not at all, but the expression, Prax. Which one would you show?
Prax stood for several minutes. Kent waited.
Would you like to talk it out? You know, discuss the subtle differences.
Annoyance, sir.
Pardon?
Kent replied. Prax turned and started walking away.
Annoyance, is it?
Kent was not surprised.
Yes, sir. Annoyance.
Kent laughed softly.
Why annoyance?
Prax stopped and turned around. His expression slowly changed.
Sir, do I really have to explain?
Kent smiled.
I think not. Thank you, Prax.
Prax resumed walking. He stepped out the room to finish his daily chores.
Mike.
Kent spoke at the ceiling.
Yes, sir. How may I be of assistance? Radio. Is radio still played? It is, sir. I can feed the audio into the auditorium. Thank you, Mike. I like that.
Hours later, Kent sat in the dark listening to a radio broadcast. The main screen was off, but Mike piped the audio through the main speakers. Becky walked into the darkened theater and sat down next to him.
I can't believe you still have radio,
he said. She nodded. Mostly the fringe conspiracy theorists and church groups crowd the waves. There's a few public stations, but not many left. Because of the Universal Radio Access Spectrum Spread Law of 2020, anyone can be a radio station. Filing fee is low, and you are allowed a broadcast range of 2 kilometers. Shortwave is off limits, but low power is allowed.
Yeah, I listen to Sesame Street. Go figure. Sesame Street on the radio.
Becky reached out and felt Kent's fingers. She gave them a squeeze.
I saw the news, the documentaries, hours of bullshit, then the radio and...
She held her breath.
The great economic divide never closed.
Even though he couldn't see her, she nodded anyway. Tears started welling up in her eyes. Her George talked like that. His voice held a resonance like sorrow, but Kent seemed to be affected more.
Becky, 20 years of political fighting. We lost the space race because of it. We suffered the greatest amount of brain drain the world witnessed because of political religious hijackers. It took 4 years under a conservative president, with a majority House and Senate, to tear down 60 years of innovation, ingenuity, and inspiration.
He shook his head.
Sorry, you lived through all of this. None of this is new to you.
He sighed.
I must sound pathetic.
Not in the least. We think alike.
You mean you and George think alike?
Becky bit down a flash of anger. No, you and I think alike. You are not George.
I'm cut from the same mold. I'm
not like George. She said it a little too loud. Look, Kent, if you were like anyone, it'd be Pete.
Pete?
George had 6 years to diverge from Pete Prime. You've only been here a few days. You add that up. She let his hand go, got up, and walked out. This is the part she was going to hate. The self-doubt and questioning. George had a hard time shaking off the specter of Kevin. Kent, now alone, couldn't stop thinking of what Becky said. If you were like anyone, it'd be Pete. This was going to nag at him for a while. Mike said,
Sir, shall I continue? What do you think I should do, Mike? Pardon, sir. I'm asking for your advice. What should I do?
There was a long pause.
Do nothing, sir. Nothing? Yes, nothing.
Kent pondered that for a moment.
Mike, continue, please.
The broadcaster began. It was written in Genesis 6 that the Nephilim took human females as wives and lovers, the spawned hybrid creatures, half human, half fallen angels. As time wore on, God decided he had to rid the world of these abominations and all of earth's wickedness. So, he tasked Noah to build the ark. Kent listened, bemused. Hadn't the coming invasion happened already? The Nephilim, Greys, Talls, all of them were supposed to reveal themselves to all of humankind. 20 years ago.
Mike, I'm done with the fringe stuff.
The broadcast stopped.
Thank you.
Kent sat in the darkness and let the minutes slip into hours. He got up looking for Becky. He had to talk to her. He wanted her thoughts. Becky sat in the upper living area, looking at pre-recorded shows on a large flat sheet monitor along the wall. George and she purchased the sheet a year ago. She barely watched it, but as of late, she was feeling nostalgic.
Becky.
She turned at the sound of Kent's voice. He rushed to her side.
I need to talk to you.
She was still miffed at Kent, but forced a congenial smile.
I was thinking about George's memories. The more I think about it, the more I am convinced it's safe.
But Mike is not sure if...
Becky, George had years to think about this. I can't see him or me not thinking this through. I need to do this.
Becky withdrew her hand. Kent shifted in his seat.
Becky, I need this. Otherwise, it'll take months, if not years, to know enough to do anything about forever life.
She nodded and bit her bottom lip. Kent picked up on the gesture.
There are other things I need to know.
His voice trailed off. Such as? His smile was slight, but he didn't want to give away too much.
Stuff.
Stuff? He nodded. You care to elaborate? The smile remained on his face, but he said nothing. Becky stared into his eyes for a moment. Her vision adjusted quickly to the darkness. George would have blinked after 20 seconds. Kent, to his credit, didn't blink. He needed Becky on this. Okay. Mike?
Yes, miss. Becky.
Prepare the seat, please.
Yes, ma'am. You look nice, Sarah,
Rick said as he approached her. He was about 2 minutes late and feeling bad about it. Sarah blushed. Thank you. You always look nice. Rick paused.
Really?
She nodded, smiled sweetly, and brushed some hair from in front of her eyes. She had most of it bunched up in a ponytail, but almost always she missed some strands, which always drifted and dangled in front of her eyes. A couple of seconds ticked by as the silence crept into being uncomfortable. Rick finally cleared his throat and turned to look at what was playing. Nothing too interesting.
Anything in particular you'd like to see? Some of the titles look interesting, but...
Sarah stopped looking at him and glanced at the list of movies. Yeah, I agree. I'm actually hungry, but we can do a movie if you'd like. He pursed his lips and slightly shook his head.
Food sounds better. Your pick. I'm game for anything.
Sarah had been serving greasy comfort food all day. She did not want to consume the same. Japanese? Rick smiled.
Kabuki's should be right around the corner.
Her smile was genuine and lovely, Rick thought. He gestured for them to start walking. They walked in silence, but glancing at one another and being caught each time. Finally, Rick laughed. He stopped and looked at Sarah. They were in front of one of the niche clubs that dotted the promenade. This club's name was China Bay. At the moment, Anything Goes was playing. She stared him in the eye and suddenly got it. She laughed too and nodded. Rick held out his hand, not certain if she really understood. She grabbed it and squeezed lightly. She understood. Tonight was fun night.
Thank you for listening to Enemy Me Part 2, Chapters 8 to 11. If you are enjoying the Enemy Me series, please give us a like and subscribe. Make sure you click on the notification icon. Enemy Me was written by J. Carrail Jones and narrated by Emily Lawrence. Comment below on your favorite parts of the story. What do you think will happen next? Until then.
I look in the mirror and I see the thing that scares me. The face looks back and I know it's me, enemy me, the one I fight. Looking through many eyes to make things right. I watch over my many selves, planning to attack the one self, dying again and again and again, only to awake and begin from the end of a self. I'm my worst enemy, fighting myself to win myself. It's a fight I have to win, not just me, but for humanity. be. The self that wants change, the self that wants fortune, the self that wants power, the self that wants control, the self that hates itself. With the rest of myselves, we work together to win. The self is lost, victory is ours. Not just the self, but for all selves. Humanity will change, but not into a self. My enemy, me, is the self. The one who lost, with the others found. We won this round, forever life is ourself. I'm my worst enemy, fighting myself to win myself. It's a fight I have to win, not just me, but for humanity. For the self that wants change, the self that wants fortune, the self that wants fortune, the self that wants power, the self that wants power, the self that hates itself. With the rest of ourselves, we work together to win. The self is lost, victory is ours. Not just the self, but for all selves. Humanity will change, but not into a self. My enemy, me, is the self. The one who lost, with the others found. We won this round, forever life is ourselves.